Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast, and we are today with Ed. But Ed, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
I'm prepared to engage.
Let's do this because
Wait, I want to take it back. I want to go preparing to engage. Okay, now I'm prepared. I don't know why I wanted to say preparing to engage. I'm prepared.
That's amazing.
I'm prepared.
And we have Ed with us today, Edward Sturm, because he made the first play-to-earn game in crypto with battling, leveling, a marketplace, and hundreds of moves and creatures. And his new startup, Commit Club, uses loss aversion, social pressure, earning, and gamification to incentivize daily challenges and habits in a trackable and decentralized way. So engagers, you can see that there's plenty that we could be discussing here today. But Edward, is there anything that we're missing from that intro?
That sounds like a great intro. Whoever wrote that should get a medal. That was a fantastic intro.
Amazing. So Ed, because we were in the pre-interview chat, we were chatting that you've been sort of moving around the world sort of in a slow, what was the name they used?
Slow matting. I've been slow matting. I'm a digital slow mat.
A digital slow mad.
Yeah, digital slow mad.
So you've been all around the world, but we want to know, like, now that you're in Romania, I think is the last thing that you mentioned. What does a life look like for you? Like, what are days filled with? What are the things that you're doing?
Oh, it's a completely above average life. Like the most interesting thing ever. My life is so fast. No, it's a very normal life. Like I was back home. I'm from Brooklyn originally, from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. And I got here a month and a half ago from New York. I've been traveling for the last 4 years, and I was just visiting home. And honestly, like my mornings here, my morning routines are a lot like they were back home in New York. I wake up at 8 a.m. I make my bed first thing every morning. I think it's like super important for people to have cornerstone habits. And the easiest one and one of the most beneficial is making your bed, because you start the day off right in this like organized way, and you have this habit that you do every morning, and it's super easy if you do it like first thing. So I make my bed and takes a minute. Then I eat raw garlic every morning. That's like a whole story in itself.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's like so. Have you ever tried eating raw garlic, Rob?
I'm not very much into eating garlic, but I love the taste around the garlic, but the garlic itself is something I don't like too much.
I just love the taste of garlic, and it's like eating raw garlic is really difficult to do.
Yeah,
because
I'm sure.
It cleans your mouth, it cleans your insides. It is antibacterial and antiviral, and it promotes healthy flora in the gut. And I had been wanting to try it, and I was living in Lviv at the time in Western Ukraine, and I was on a date. And this guy walked by me, and he overheard me speaking, because I guess I have a loud voice. And he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm from Brooklyn." And he's like, I used to live in Williamsburg. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I had an apartment in Williamsburg." And he lived like, we were meeting in Western Ukraine, but he lived like at the same time that I lived there, a few blocks away from me in Brooklyn. Huh. And so we became friends, and I had like 5 hours to kill when I was leaving Lviv before I had to go to the airport. So I hung out at his apartment, and it was the morning, and he was eating garlic. He had a clove of raw garlic. And I'm like, "I've always wanted to try that, but I thought it would make you smell bad." He's like, "I've been doing this for 3 years," and he didn't smell different at all. It just smelled like a normal human. And so I'm like, wow, I guess I could try this because I won't smell bad. So anyway, I eat the raw garlic. Then I do have a bit of an abnormal morning routine, because I've been meditating every day for the last 12 years. So I do an 11-minute guided Wim Hof breathing exercise. It's like this 40 million viewed video on YouTube. Justin Bieber went on the Ellen DeGeneres show to talk about how Wim Hof method changed his life. So I do this 11-minute breathing thing. which is amazing. And I recommend it to everybody. Search on YouTube, Wim Hof breathing. And then I do a 20-minute open eyes meditation where I just sit quietly with my eyes open. And then I go on a walk. And then I love going on walks. Then I go on a walk. And that's my morning. I think that was your question. How do you start your days in Romania? And that's how I do it.
Amazing. And what else fills your days? Like, what are you doing like after your morning routine when you're working or not working? Like, what are you doing the rest of the day?
You know, I really like, when I'm working, I really like the Pomodoro technique. Have you tried that?
Yes, intermittently, to be honest. I've found it hard to have the discipline to do it for so many things. But yeah, I like when I do get to stick to it. It's been an interesting experiment for sure.
How do you do it when you do it? Because people have different ways of doing it.
Yeah, well, like for me, the times that I've used it, it's mostly like, oh, I'm going to do this task and I think it's going to take X amount of time, which should be at least less than, I think it was 45 minutes, the last maximum I set myself. So I put that and I try to sort of keep on task and not do anything else. And then have, depending on the length of that one, have a break of, anything from 5 to 8, maybe 10 minutes.
I think the Pomodoro technique is supposed to be like you don't work for more than 25 minutes at a stretch. The way that I would do it is I set a timer for 25 minutes. I close like all social media and messengers, and I work on my task. When the timer goes off, I have to step away from my computer, and I step away for like 3 to 5 minutes. And I'll do 4 of those 25-minute sessions, and then I force myself to take a minimum 20-minute break. And it's so frustrating too if you're in like flow state and the 25-minute timer goes. It's so frustrating, but it's actually also amazing because you think you like step away from your computer and you think of all these optimizations that improve your work that you wouldn't have thought of if you were just sitting there, like changing the color of like, here's like a perfect example would be like you're working in Figma. And if for people who don't know, Figma is like the leading UI UX tool. And it's an amazing tool. I used to use Sketch before Figma. Figma blows my mind. And so you're like working in Figma and you're like toying around with the color of a button or something, color and positioning of a button. And you're doing that for, like 15 minutes or whatever, experimenting with all these different things. Timer goes off, step away from your computer, and you realize you don't even need the button. That's the type of realizations that you get with the Pomodoro technique. And like, I'm not always perfect like you doing it. Because like today I worked for like 2 hours at a stretch at some cafe. I got a huge slice of raspberry cheesecake and Americano, and I just sat there for 2 hours straight glued to my screen. But when you do it, I think it's a cool thing.
Like the only sort of caveat for me is it depends on what kind of work you're doing. Sometimes the problem is if it's 25 minutes and it's strict on the 25 minutes, which I've also definitely heard of as well. Problem is that some tasks require a setup time and concentration to get started, right? And depending on that task, that might be 10 to 15 minutes. so I'm actually, not really working or really getting into the task for maybe other 10 minutes. And that's where I actually lose some of my productivity. I like taking the breaks is something that I definitely could use more of. But the problem is being too strict about the 25 minutes is where, like, for sure, when I tried that for the first few times, that's where it broke and I stepped away from it.
Oh, wow.
Then I heard about, there's this, I think it's egg timer.
Yeah.
e.ggtimer.com.
I think the tomato timer too. That's another similar one. Yeah.
But this one, like you put the 45 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, you decide how much it is. And, that was what took me like to the next level. And then I put like 45 minutes, and when it ends, then I put another timer for how long I'm going to be off, and then, sort of go from one thing to the other. So
wow,
that kind of worked a lot better for me.
That worked a lot better for you.
The other thing that ideally you can combine that with, and this is from a past guest. I don't know if you've heard of Nir Eyal.
What's it called? Nir Eyal?
Yeah, he has a book called Hooked, which was the most famous one initially.
Oh, I know Hooked.
Yeah, so he's the author of Hooked, and now he has another one called Indistractable. So he talks about things that have been researched and talked about in other places, but he explains very well the whole time boxing and the strategy of time boxing, how it helps sort of focus and not get distracted and so on. So if you combine the Pomodoro with time boxing, which essentially is I'm going to do this task for an hour, and after that I'm done, or I should be done. That is where I think there is a sweet point. But the problem is getting organized like that, given my work schedule, is really hard. But enough about me.
Okay, all right. I was going to be like, what's your work schedule like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit crazy, to be honest. Like I do work, sort of regular hours for Ironhack. Then I'm usually either preparing something to teach in upcoming days, or I'm working for the podcast, or I might be doing a consulting project. There's like many things going on. And the problem, especially at Ironhack, is as well that since, sort of we were joking about this, I think it was even today, that, we were in a meeting and, somebody said like, oh, what would a B2B meeting or enterprise meeting be without, the word surprise, So every time there's always another surprise. And that's sort of part of the nature of the work when you work with enterprise and companies, because you're sort of trying to I don't want to say please, because it sounds like we're sort of a people pleaser, but you're in a way you're trying to please the client, as a company, right? So to cater to their needs and to do the best.
I was doing SEO for Fortune 100 companies, for like some of the biggest companies in the world. I think before the call you mentioned P&G. I did SEO for them. So like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I can't spell enterprise without.
So you're sitting down on your focus time, and what I do is I don't check Slack every minute, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't see it all the time.
Yeah.
But you get a Slack message or you get an email, and of course you have to get out of focus. And the plan that you had for the day for doing this and that has to change, because now you have to do this other thing. Like even sprints are a bit of a struggle sometimes for me, and being in a product team. But that's sort of part of the nature of the work I'm doing, right? So that's where I've been struggling a little bit implementing that on my daily work, which is where it would at this point have the most impact for me.
Dude, focus is life. Focus is life. I closed Discord. I realized when we started this recording, I'm like, Discord is still open, and it's going to go off and take me out of flow, and I want to maintain the flow. So flow and focus is everything. I get it.
Yeah. No, 100%. So about this work that you've been doing, because you created the first, what's the name? Play to earn game in crypto. You also have something in Commit Club that uses loss aversion, social pressure, etc. Have you had, and I'm sure you have with all this experience that you've had, one of those times when you were going north and things went south, right? Like you were trying to do something and it just didn't work. One of those fail moments or first attempts in learning, which, maybe you pivoted out of or solved it in the end. But we want to sort of be there with you and take out some of those lessons that you managed to get from that.
Okay, so the play to earn game, that was released, like we started getting interest for that before it was built, and that was in the middle of January 2018. And I'm trying to remember some of we made management mistakes at the time. That's one of the things. Oh my God, what am I thinking? We made the biggest mistake ever and completely missed out on NFTs. Okay, this is a great story. And oh man, this is a great story. And it actually, so my new philosophy on business is when you start a venture, you should be prepared to fail for the first 2 years. Just mentally be prepared to fail for the first 2 years and to stick with something. And so we got insane interest when we launched this. So, and we made a lot of money, like right when we launched this. And it was like a very like prototype-y version. So in December of 2017, this like project called CryptoKitties was released, and it made like $28 million in like a week or something. And it took down the Ethereum network. It was super, super popular, created like all these brands off it. It wasn't really play to earn because all you were doing was breeding digital cats and selling them. And I think it was like also like a lot of random. It wasn't like really like a video game. It was more of like an experiment that went hyper viral. And all the digital cats, they were NFTs. NFTs didn't really exist before this. I think there were the ideas for them, but they didn't exist. And we were the first people to launch a video game. And we looked at them, and we're all gamers ourselves. I'm a big gamer. I've logged hundreds of hours in Pokemon. Like I watched the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 this morning. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, I played Octopath Traveler for 100 hours last year. I can't wait for the second one.
Huh.
And Octopath Traveler. Oh, and the soundtrack for Octopath is great. Like, I have stories about that game. But not getting sidetracked. But so we released this like very prototypey version in the middle of January 2018, made a lot of money really, really fast. And we're like, this is cool. That means this is validated. People want this. This is great. And so we went out building the full game over the course of 2018. So when we launched, the price of Ethereum, the price of one Ether was $1,400. And over the course of 2018, this like crazy bull run went into what was called crypto winter. And now people wonder if we're in like another crypto winter. That really went into crypto winter. And the price of Ethereum by 2019 was like $80. And so we were about to release our game. I think it was November 2018. We got stuck in development for a bunch of silly reasons. And we're finally about to release the game. All these really high level people in crypto and blockchain are super interested. The co-founder of OpenSea, like we had all these calls with one of the co-founders of OpenSea. He's like, I love your project so much. Like, it'd be so great to have you on OpenSea. We'll feature you. Like, and OpenSea right now, it's the leading NFT marketplace. It's one of the biggest projects in Web3. One of the biggest companies in Web3. And at the time, they had just launched. And he wanted us to change our game to NFTs because we didn't know if NFTs were going to catch on. Like the ERC 721 or ERC 1155 standard, we didn't know if these technical standards for NFTs were going to catch on or if NFTs would really be a big thing. And we're just like, let's really just make this like decentralized game. And no one even called it play to earn at the time, but it was play to earn because like you leveled up and leveling up allowed you to get rarer, stronger monsters that you could battle with to increase your level more. And then you could sell these monsters on the open market. And so we released the game without NFTs because we didn't want to delay ourselves anymore. And we didn't know if NFTs were going to catch on. And so this is why I say the 2-year thing. Crypto winter hit. Price of Ethereum went to $80 per token from $1,400. We lost like all our money. And
but you mean like you had your money on Ethereum and that's why you lost your money, but did it have something to do with the company?
We had sold a bunch of it when it was, I mean, I won't speak for everybody else, but like I had sold my portion. I did like the first time successful founder thing and I got a fancy apartment in New York. And I didn't buy when I was renting, but I had sold like a bunch of it and it was just the price kept on going down. So we made all of this money, but then it was like split between 5 people and the price had decreased by like, I guess more than 10x. And so like all this, the amount that we made, it was so little by the time. And I mean, one of the mistakes that we made is we should have taken it out right away and put it in the stable coin. And we didn't want people to think that we were like rugging them. And so we just like left it. We didn't even touch the contract for the prototype. We wanted people to like understand like we're really doing this. And by the time we'd already taken it out, it had decreased a lot. And then we just left it in Ether thinking it would go back up and it went in the opposite direction. And yeah, we lost a lot. And so we didn't have to miss out on like the NFT rush. What happened was, this is why I say stick with the project for 2 years. So like we were called the top blockchain game in 2018, 2019. Like the top people in the space were talking about us. I was being recognized at conferences. But like a lot of the money from the space had gone. A lot of our money had gone. And we were getting offers from elsewhere. And we left crypto in 2019. Had we been prepared to just grind on this project when we started it, we would have switched over to NFTs after release. And then we would have been there at the beginning of the NFT boom. We would have been one of the first NFT projects and like we'd be $1 billion company. Because there's like another company called Axie Infinity, which has received a lot of negative press lately, but they're a $3 billion company and they launched 2 months after us. And like we talked to them I have all these crazy stories and they couldn't get users at the beginning. We had all these users and they launched after us. They're a $3 billion company and we are not $3 billion company. So I think there's a pretty big mess up. And so when I returned to New York, I mentioned to you before we started the recording that I was traveling for all these years. I was actually out of the country for 3 years. And when I returned to New York, it felt like it wasn't my home at the beginning. I felt like a tourist in my own city and where I grew up. And I felt a little bit intimidated as well, looking at all these billion-dollar skyscrapers and walking through the winding streets of Fidei and staring up at these several $100 million penthouses. And I realized about New York City and startups in general, but especially New York, is that New York and the startup world, and you hear all these stories, and I think it psychs out a lot of founders into quitting too soon, when if they actually stuck with something, it would have been lucrative. And so all these founders quit ventures that otherwise would have been lucrative. And so the lesson that I got from our play to earn game, it's called World of Ether, and yeah, the negative thing taking you there, is stick with a project. And it relates, and I'll stop my rant in a second. It relates back to what we're doing, Commit Club, which is all about daily consistency. And just, I think consistency is just everything in life. Consistency, similar focus, it really is so important. All right. Thank you for letting me talk. Feel like if I'm going on too long, feel free to interrupt me.
Amazing. But like, I did want to sort of double click on something there, because you were saying that like the problem was you didn't stick with it. Was it because, so they sort of bought you out and that was it for you? Like, what would have been different? Like, what would you have done different beyond, sort of where you invested the money and so on? But at the time, like, what would have been done for you to stick with it, or what would that have meant in your case?
Yeah, so here's what happened. So we spent 11 months building the full game, and it was a complex game, a beautiful game. Like, you can go and watch videos of it on YouTube. We tried to launch it as an NFT project and missed the window. So like the site doesn't have the game on it anymore, but like, oh my God, we had a soundtrack made for it that's on Spotify by this producer in the UK, and he's brilliant. His name is Dan Farley, and the monsters are so gorgeous. And we had 200 moves in it. Like we're all gamers, and we had 200 monsters and like 900 moves, like with the most creative names. Like, so anyway, we spent 11 months building out this like crazy game, and we actually bootstrapped the whole thing. We had our previous money from previous ventures that we all had worked on, aside from being co-founders together. So we launched it without having NFTs in. And if we had stuck with it, we would have built out the game more. There were tons of things that we put out a bunch of iterations after we launched, but they weren't like crazy major iterations. Like the most major thing would have been turning the monsters to NFTs. And we could have done that in 2019, along with tons of other things, and we didn't do that. And so we had all decided together, like, look, it's been like a year since we launched this. Let's give it another year. We would have been like, okay, what should we do next? Oh, NFTs. Like we had talked about that before. We had explored that for a month and we didn't do it. And we would have done NFTs. So that's what I mean. Like we would have done that, all these other things. And by the time the NFT market came around, like we would have been this super sophisticated NFT game. And yeah.
Huh. Got it.
I'm sure you heard about everyone knows about, I mean, South Park had an episode about NFTs. I'm sure you heard about the crazy NFT rush.
Yeah, for sure. So engagers, I would say, like, I know this is not the typical, sort of what do we do and these sort of game design questions and how do I get started and that kind of thing. But I do think there's many lessons that you can hear here, especially when it comes to sticking to it, right? It does happen a lot when you're creating, you're doing your things, whether it's for education, whether it's for your, company project or whatever. It does happen that you have setbacks, right? Like things don't go your way. You're expecting this to work this way and it didn't, and that's normal. That happens to everybody. The thing is, what do you do about it, right? And in the case of Ed, what he's saying now is he should have stuck to it and sort of moved on and pushed forward. And that's something that you need to tell yourself a lot as well when you're doing these things, because you will have setbacks. You will have times when you say, this is not worth it. This is too much effort. I just want to stop here. Well, it's pretty often it is actually a time to say, well, you know what? I need to put in the effort. I need to push forward.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You put in the effort. I mean, it worked. It's not like it didn't work out for us. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like we're all doing crazy things, but yeah, like they could have been,
And that's it. That's it, Ed. Thank you so much for that. And then we would like to know, I mean, you've been through so many of these projects. You've, especially as a founder, I think you've done so much. Would you say that there is, I don't know if calling it a process makes sense, but like how do you face, new projects, or you're going to create a new company? How does that work for you? How do would that stick to it for at least 2 years? What happens in between? Like, what are the things that you have to do, or that the company has to do to have a good chance at success? At least, do you have, again, a process, a series of steps? How does that look?
Yeah, I've done a bunch, and honestly, the truth is, like, I'm pretty humble about this. I'm constantly learning, and I make tons of mistakes, and I've done crazy things, like before the game, like I said, I was doing SEO for Fortune 100 companies. Before that, I was making viral videos that have gotten like hundreds of millions of views. I was going on TV shows, the biggest TV shows in the United States, like 2020 and Good Morning America, talking about these viral videos. And for a long time, it was just like I wanted to do what I thought was cool. Then it was I wanted to work with people who I thought were cool. And the crypto game, that was, I didn't think of that. That was thought of by my friend Alan, and he was a mentor to me. And he's asked me to be director of marketing for that. And I had to say yes, he was a mentor. And Commit Club, we created that while living in Kiev. And my co-founder is a very smart guy. He came up with the idea, and I wanted to work with him. And then actually our designer, he was senior product designer at Grammarly, like made their entire iOS app. I wanted to work with him as well. So for me, it's just been like, I've wanted to work with people that I like and that I trust, but tons of people have like different ways of going about it. Actually, my like overall belief is like, it's not the idea that will make a company successful. I think it's completely the entrepreneur, and a great entrepreneur can take the worst idea and make it into something tangible. I really believe that. Really, really, really believe that.
Amazing. That sounds great.
Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's at RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement.
So Ed, after hearing all these things about your experience with this game, after hearing about your experience on entrepreneurship as well in general, what would you say is perhaps and with the questions you've heard up to now, would you say that there's somebody that you would like to listen to, like a future guest, answering these questions, or perhaps talking a little bit more about gamification, somebody maybe that you admire, that you've heard of, that even? Is there such a person that you could name?
Let's see. You know who would be cool? It'd probably, I think, Sam Parr from the My First Million podcast. he'd be great. Or like, so my co-founder for World of Ether, his name is Alan Goldman, and he loves building video games. And he thinks of crazy mechanics, and he loves coming up with crazy mechanics. You'd be a great guest. And he's always going on rants to me about wild mechanics for the games that he creates.
Amazing. Sounds like a pretty good one. So Ed, let's sort of go for the recommendations at this point. Is there any book that you would recommend an audience like this one? Keep in mind that these are people who are thinking of, just like you did, gamification. How do you incentivize people to do things? Like, again, direct inspiration, or maybe something that could help them, or that could make them think about something different. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, there's one that I really like. Daniel Kahneman.
Yes.
Yeah. About the cognitive biases. And we've used a bunch of these in Commit Club, like loss aversion, or I forget what the actual technical name is for peer pressure that we put in. But what's the name? Oh my God, what's the name of his most famous book?
Depends. Like depends on which one you're talking about. Let me actually look it up quickly. But he has plenty of amazing books related to gamification as well. Like, he doesn't write for gamification, but that we have used plenty in the gamification world.
Yeah,
I would say that there's at least two of them for sure. Let me look for that here.
The cognitive biases, it's so interesting the way how he describes those cognitive biases. Also, I think
There's thinking fast and slow is one that.
yeah, I think it's Thinking Fast and Slow. That was the one that I'm thinking of, and I read that last year while living in Kiev, and it was just such a refreshing book. I love books like that. I also love Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think that's like
It's an
Warren
amazing
Buffett's
book.
like top recommended book. Like actually, so one of the things is if you like the color pink is more likely. Maybe you know this already. There's like a specific shade of pink that makes people more likely to say yes, and so or to like you. No, I think it's like it's either say yes or to like you, but they're pretty similar. I think it's saying yes, and so I now like half of my wardrobe is t-shirts in this shade of pink, and I wear them to like all these meetings, to like meetings with influential people, or meetings with influencer, or with meetings with investors. Like I was back in New York, and I was meeting with a potential investor in our company, and he goes, "Pink is your new color now. You're like wearing this all the time." And I'm like, I love the color pink. Yeah, Influenced by Robert Cialdini. Or the other excuse is, the other interesting thing from that book that stuck out to me that I remember, because I read this book a long time ago, was if you need to like cut someone in line, but you use the word because, they'll comply like immediately. It's like, excuse me, I need to cut you in, like you're waiting in line to use a printer or something, to use a copy machine. Excuse me, I need to cut you in line because I need to copy my papers. And like it could be something as dumb as that, and you say because, and people say yes, and like these like cognitive
It helps a
biases.
lot.
Yeah, have you tried it?
I have tried it with some things. I like the thing is, yeah, I've tried it experimentally. I haven't done it in like real life. Normally, I haven't done it much, to be honest.
I think I've used it like here and there. I've gotten like really good at skipping lines. Probably, God, listeners probably think I'm like the worst person. It was it was me and my friend, and we were waiting. There was like a 90-minute line for the Whitney when it I think reopened in New York, and this was many years ago. And I got this from my friend. My friend was like, I learned this while in Rome. Just go with me. And so he's how did he do this? I think we would wait next to the start of the line, and we would like wait around just looking at our phones, and we'd wait there for like 2-3 minutes. And as the line moved, people who were further back in line, they thought we were already in line, and so we just kind of like surreptitiously slipped into the line because the people behind us thought that we were already in line, and we would save like 90 minutes waiting in lines by just looking at our phones, just standing there.
Damn.
And yeah. That's a life hack right there. That's a life hack for lines.
I don't know if I want to recommend that one, engagers. We've also talked about the ethics of using these techniques. So again, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. You make your own choices.
Listen, only in emergencies. yeah, only in emergencies.
There you go. So Ed, what would you say in this world? What would you say is your superpower? Like that thing that you do at least better than most other people. And please don't say cut in line.
No, I won't say cut in line. My superpowers. That I do better. Oh, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine actually just this morning, and I'm really good at two things. I'm really good at SEO, but I think SEO comprises of so many different things that it's hard to use that as like a superpower. So honestly, my superpower, what I have like an unusually great ability for, is recognizing strong character. Because I noticed this because my friend who I was talking to, I'm like, listen, man, you are really bad at recognizing character in people. And we have a very honest relationship. And I said to him, and I'm like, listen, if you're going to work with someone in the future, just like, let me talk to this person. Because I am very good, I think, of recognizing people of integrity and character. And I for whatever reason, I seem to attract, I think, great people into my life. Everyone has noticed it. They're like, why is that able to do that? And I don't. That's my superpower.
There you go.
It's not
Superpower.
cutting. It's
Very,
not
very
cutting
useful one
lines.
as well.
Not cutting lines. Yeah. What I have a question. So what's the most interesting gamification or cognitive bias or game theory thing that you're into at the moment?
Right now, I'm usually like the main thing that I'm usually focusing on tends to be something related to the work that I do somewhere in education, right? So that's typically what I'm spending most of my thought in, so to speak. I have found that one of the things that is surprisingly interesting about specifically the world of education is how something that might sound as small as giving people a choice on how to do things can work wonders, right? So
Really?
an experiment I did, and I told them right after the sort of experiment was over. So I had this, I would say, weird situation without a doubt, which was that since I'm teaching in a master's program, it's about customer experience and innovation, right? So I'm teaching in this program, and the thing is that because I was not sort of a founder, so to speak, of the program, my subject of gamification was something super interesting for the academic director for a while, but he hadn't included it, right? Like he hadn't found the right person. He was kind of doing some things around that, but he had never included someone. We spoke, he got excited. One of the subjects, he was going to take it away because the subject was not being as productive. And I'm not sure if the professor as well was not sort of up to speed with the program. He said, look, I had the opportunity without, embarrassing the university or, having trouble with the regulators who give us the certification of being an official master's. That's a sort of a big thing, at least in Spain. If you change too much, they take away the certification. So you have to certify it yourself again. And it's kind of troublesome. Mm-hmm. So he gave me this subject, which was I have 3 classes with them on every one of their 3 periods, right? So I see them 3. The other thing is that the groups in at the school are predetermined, right? So you have the groups for the first period, for the second period, and the third period. And it's not determined by students, right? So in the second period, they start a long group work, which I had to cut in 2, which was already difficult enough. But then they had to do the same, like continue that with another group. So how do you split up, who's going to do what, right? Like I had project 1, project A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? Who's going to take project A? Who's going to take project B? Do I do it randomly? Do I do it myself? Will they complain about this? And I said, look, you know what? I'm going to give them 5 minutes, right? But they have a choice. They're going to be up for it, and they're going to decide what projects they're going to do, right? And I said, if you don't, pull it together, I'm going to give you a random choice. That's predetermined. Your best option is to get together and agree upon that. 5 minutes, they made it. That was it. I mean, if I send an email and ask like, oh,
so
what do you
they had to come up with a solution themselves and do
yes.
it. Yeah.
Just like in games, they don't tell you like, oh, press the sword button 5 times against the dragon when you're right in front of it. But you're going to do that in the first 5 seconds. And no, they tell you like, you have a sword, there's a dragon, you like do your thing, right? And maybe you die and you try it back.
Yep.
Maybe you just do it on the first time, whatever that looks like. But it's up to you.
Dude,
right?
Everyone hates tutorials. We all no one reads the manual.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I literally gave them that. And at the end, I mean, to be entirely fair, there was one which nobody wanted to do for whatever reason. So 2 groups ended up doing the same one. But that was fine. I mean, that's a lot better than having a huge conflict over who does what. And I said, look, you know what? Both of you do it. You're going to have different solutions for the end. So that's fine. And it's like, oh, really? They were surprised that they managed to do it. And then I said yes to repeating one of them. And that was it. Like, sort of that was a head breaker for me. And I got to the class like expecting that, it could go really wrong. But then I said, like, I'm going to do this and see what happens, right? Like worst case, I give them random.
This is such an interesting conversation. It's because it's like, so in Commit Club, in our project, we have a 3-step wizard. It's like write down the name of whatever you want to commit to, put in how many days you want to commit to it, and then put in how much you want to stake on your ability to follow through with your daily commitment. And something that we've talked about a lot is like, can we automate any of this? And it's interesting, it's because on one hand, you want to like remove as much friction as possible. And by telling people what to do or making it really easy to do it and removing choices oftentimes gets people to do things. But on the other hand, leaving in choices gets people to follow through with things. And it's like, when do you give someone a choice to do something, and when do you make it easy for them and not give them the choice?
Well, games are essentially, and I've heard this definition many times, and I really enjoy it, especially for these situations, is, games are a series of unnecessary obstacles. So, the sort of UX principles tell you, you have to make it simple, you have to make it easy, and it's true. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is absolutely true. But, it's not just about making it simple. Sometimes you have to challenge people, and if they rise up to the challenge, you set up the right challenge. If not, maybe you have to iterate and check up on it. But it's not always just about making it easier. Because if it were about being easier, the easiest games would be the most popular. And that's, tell Dark Souls that being an easy game is the way to go, right?
Yeah. Oh man, or Elden Ring. but well, the thing is, it's like people also, like with the difficult things, people know there's a payoff. There's a payoff.
Oh, of course.
There's a payoff in those games, and you like the difficulty.
Watch out! Like, what does payoff mean? Like, you finish the game and that's it.
But there's a sense of satisfaction that
it comes from doing the difficult thing.
But also, like, I think also, like, with hard games, like we're just talking about video games. Like
hard games in general.
Hard games, for me speaking from experience, it's like, okay, the cutscenes, the story, it's so much more, like, I always play Halo on Legendary because I love the story in Halo, and the story is a lot more meaningful when I personally have to struggle to get through these challenges. And there's a payoff there. But I guess like within UX though, it's like you just want someone to use your product and to start, and you want someone to start, and then it's loss aversion, because then what happens is they start, and then, like, okay, they completed the wizard, and then they go on to the next thing, and once they've interacted with because I went through some platform recently to go on more podcasts because I'm like, this is really fun, and you think that the wizard is going to be like, the entry wizard for it is going to be this simple thing, this like 2-step thing. It ends up taking like 45 minutes, and 20 minutes in, you're like, oh man, like, this is way longer than I thought, but I've already invested 20 minutes, and then you invest the rest. And that's like the difficulty thing.
But it's not easy.
You make it seem like it's low friction, and then actually fooled you. Gotcha.
So there's all sorts of things going on there. But, however, it's been a bit longer than we usually go for engagers. I'm happy that you're still hanging on there with us, because I think we've touched on very, very interesting subjects. Many of them, to be honest, not all of them I've touched upon before, because you had interesting questions as well, Ed. So thanks for that. However, before we take off, before we move on to our next project or thing, Ed, can you tell us, where can we find out more about you, about your projects, what you're doing these days on the world of the internet before we take off?
Yeah, so we have this thing called the 30-day challenge builder. It's from Commit Club. So you could either just go to the Commit Club site, or you could Google 30-day challenge builder, and we're right there, number one. And because I think 30-day challenges are the most amazing thing in the world. Like, anyone can take on any habit and improve themselves, especially through small chunking and intentional practice with like a 30-day challenge where you do something for 30 consecutive days. So I'm really passionate about that. And then you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Edward_Sturm, just my first name _ and my last name. And I love talking with people. My DMs are open. Hit me up anytime.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ed, for sharing all your experience, all your knowledge, all the things that you've been doing. Some of your, darker and lighter experiences for sure. However, engagers, Ed, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Ed. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask guests like Ed, or like any of the ones that we will have in the future, please go to professorgame.com/question and ask that question. If and when it is selected, it'll come up in an episode, and you'll get that answer live during an episode. The guests won't even know that question in advance. I like to surprise them with a question so that they come up with an answer right there on the spot. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, before you hit continue, remember to subscribe or follow absolutely for free using your favorite podcast app, and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.